the quorums of both the village council and the planning commission here this evening. We will call both of those entities to order in this process. So what I'll do is I'll call the village council to order and have the roll call, and then Gary, if you could call the planning commission to order. Okay, so at this time, I call the special joint meeting of the Village Council and Planning Commission to order on Monday, May 20th, 2019, at 7 p.m. Madam Clerk, roll call for the Village Council, please.
Bailey?
Here.
Frost?
Here, sorry.
Helmut?
Yes.
Kemp?
Yes,
Logan?
she's on her way.
All right.
Ready?
Yep.
All right, then. Also at this time, I call the May 20th meeting, joint session meeting of the Village of Oxford Planning Commission to order. And Madam Secretary, I'd ask you to call the roll for the Planning Commission as well, please.
Sure. Ballard?
Here.
Bama? Here. Cook? Here. Curtis?
Here.
Douglas?
Here.
Helmut?
Here.
Hylak? Here.
All right, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, at this time, we'll make some introductions before we get underway. And before we get underway, I know it's very formal in here, but our goal is that this is a town hall. Don't think of this as a council meeting. We are here to listen to you. We are here to listen to the issues. We are here to listen to our attorney, Bob Davis, our planner, Mario, I never say your last name right. Ortega, and a representative from the Michigan Municipal League, Chris Johnson, who will sort of moderate this. Again, the planning commissioners and the village council members, we really want to listen to you. We want to listen to, the community, and so we'll shut up and we'll let Chris moderate and kind of work through this. We don't have any goals of limiting discussion. We don't have any goals of putting time frames on, saying 3 minutes is all you get. That's not our goal here tonight. Our goal is to have an open and honest conversation about recreational marijuana and the potential of having that in our commercial, as a commercial use in our zoning. So that's what we're here for. And I'm going to turn it over to, I guess I can start with, who am I starting with? Bob?
Sure.
Bob or the planner? We'll go Bob, planner, and then Chris. All right?
Good job.
Yes.
Just for those coming in now, we do have some documents up here. One's print out from the MML on the recreational marijuana questions and answers. And then there's also a thing from our attorney that was put together a few months ago regarding the statute, things that are in the statute. And then a zoning ordinance map, because as we talked about certain areas of the village, the zoning ordinance map might be pertinent if you need it.
Thank you.
So by way of introduction, we as a village council are currently on a moratorium with respect to recreational marijuana issues. That was voted on a while ago, and as part of the moratorium process, which means we're not currently accepting applications or processing any applications, we agreed that we would have this public forum so that the village council could hear from the residents and then provide guidance back to the planning commission to do carry out the policy of what the village council decides. I can give you some updates. At our last meeting involving the moratorium, I advised you that it was my understanding the governor would be moving up the date to which the regs would be issued. The first set of regulations concerning recreational marijuana will in fact be issued at the very beginning of June, some say actually June 1st. Applications concerning recreational marijuana may be heading towards the state of Michigan by September, so it may be that the village would have to act on an ordinance scheme at or before September or have a prohibitive ordinance in place, or so that it could be protected from litigation. Unlike the medical marijuana process, which required, if you do nothing, you're doing everything to keep it out of your community, the way the framework was set up for recreational marijuana is you have to do something to either prohibit it or to allow it in your community. So this evening, we're hoping to hear your thoughts for and against this type of activity being in your community, and this is a public forum for that. Mr. Planner?
Good evening. My role in the process would be if the council provides any further direction to the planning commission, and the planning commission undertake the general ordinance creation process. I would help draft a language for any kind of regulation from a zoning standpoint. The key thing we have to understand is that this type of use is mandated under a state statute that will be regulated by a state department. So they will be taking on a lot of the details with regards to the operation and who would be authorized to operate this type of facility. The local ordinance from a zoning standpoint, at least, what the planning commission would consider, would be related to the various zoning aspects, meaning the location of where these would be placed, any kind of special use requirements in terms of things like hours of operation, size of facility, separation distance from other facilities. Then we would also go into the approval criteria to allow someone to come in to operate such use, and then also any type of application procedures. So those are the details that would be part of an ordinance should we get to that point. And beyond that, there are a lot of details involved with regards to the different types of uses, which I believe questions can be answered tonight, and then I believe our representative from the Michigan Municipal League will provide a lot of that general information in the beginning.
Okay, and we'll have Chris introduce himself real quick, but after we do, and once we get into the meat of this discussion, we'll approve the agenda real quick. That's the next item. Chris, if you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll approve the agenda.
Hi, I'm Chris Johnson. I'm General Counsel to the Michigan Municipal League. I found that my second career now is recreational marijuana. There's been a lot of questions asked about this particular subject, and we have some answers, but not all the answers. And this will be a good forum tonight to let us know what you're thinking of as far as marijuana establishments. So looking forward to getting on with it.
All right, thank you, Chris. Thank you all for all of your introductions. Moving on to the approval of the agenda before we open it up for public comment.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for the village council as presented.
I'll support.
There's a motion with support to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Planning Commission, if you do the same.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for the planning commission as presented.
Very much, Paul. Madam Secretary, I have a motion on the table to accept the agenda as submitted tonight. I also have a second on that, so I would ask my fellow commissioners to please vote yea or nay in favor of that. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, thank you, Madam Secretary. That motion carries. Agenda is approved.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We now move into our public comment section. And again, council, we may chime in at times, but our goal is to have, and I'm reiterating this because some folks came in after we had started talking, but our goal is to have an open and honest conversation about recreational marijuana and its commercial use in the village of Oxford. So I'll turn it over to Chris from MML, and he'll sort of moderate this discussion. So, you know, it's not a free-for-all, but orderly fashion kind of thing. So, but I'll let Chris manage all that. Thank you.
Very good. I thought by way of quick introduction, we should talk a little bit about what we're going to be talking about. It's quite clear that all of the individual possession issues are already in place. The possession of small amounts of adult use marijuana, that's the term, by the way, that the state is using, adult use rather than recreational, is already in place and already legal. So we're not really discussing that. The statute in the second instance actually creates recreational marijuana establishments, is the phraseology they use. And it's kind of interesting because the phraseology in the recreational statute is different than in the medical statute. So there's going to be some confusion, some overlap, and probably a lot of litigation before this all gets sorted out. The medical marijuana statute that the legislature finally passed to cite facilities in the state took about 8 years. I'm not thinking we're going to wait that long for the recreational things to be decided, but there are a lot of issues in the recreational statute that just are not known. And quite frankly, until we get the actual litigation and a judge to say this is what this means, we'll probably be saying, well, I don't know. So that's a little frustrating, especially when you're a lawyer like I am. You'll want to know exactly what's going on. And in this case, we're not going to be able to tell you exactly what's going to be going on. The state has created 6 different kinds of licenses in the recreational statute, and the statute will include growers' licenses and 3 different kinds of those. It'll include a transport license. It'll include testing facilities. It will also include a new micro business, which is going to be a vertically integrated license. That's probably got the most interesting thing because we don't have that at all in the medical situation. So we're going to watch and see what that really means. I have been in a lot of meetings with the Director of Marijuana Regulatory Authority. That's a new name. It used to be the Bureau of Marijuana Regulation. They're moving a lot of different things around in Lansing right now. But Andrew Brisboe has been in a number of seminars I've been at and a number of question and answer situations. About a month ago, maybe a little longer, for the first time, he indicated to a group of people that he thought that the state was going to accelerate getting emergency rules out. And he's pretty confident right around June 1st, they'll have the first draft of the emergency rules ready for publication. He also indicated at that meeting that they're hopeful, but they don't want to get tied to this, but they're hopeful to have a system in place to accept applications for these establishments around September the 1st. And that's the first time I heard that particular date in play. We kept hearing up until that time that we hope we're ready by December, which is when they were required to have their rules in place. As a result of that, any community that wants to regulate it in any degree has to have ordinances in place by the date that they start accepting applications. So that's a big difference in terms of September, maybe early September compared to early December. So they're moving the time frame up significantly, which means you got to get ready. As was previously mentioned, this statute has an opt-out requirement as opposed to the medical marijuana, which was opt-in. And what that means is that if the village council does nothing and you just let the time go by, you will automatically be allowing every type of license in the village. So if you want to regulate it at all in terms of what kinds of licenses or when the hours of operations might be, or signage, or any of those issues, you have to have an ordinance in place by the time the application is submitted. Otherwise, the Marijuana Regulatory Authority will issue that license. Okay? Director Brisboe was very clear that you had to have your ordinance in place beforehand and not wait till after it had already been submitted. Those are the basic ground rules. So I guess at this point, I kind of want to open it up to everybody to make their comments and let the council know and the planning commission know what your feelings are on this issue. Yes, ma'am.
Are you able to better define the 6 licensing types? What does transportation mean?
Oh, and I'm sorry, and I will say, and I don't like it because it's so formal, and that's not my goal, but for everyone's voice to be able to be heard on the video, if you could come to the podium. Again, I know it like defeats the whole, like, let's not be formal. Yeah. So let's be formal instead, I guess.
I can do that. I would like to know if it's possible to do a short definition of what the 6 licensing types are. I don't know what those things mean.
Alrighty. Well, a grower license is kind of obvious. Oh.
Just a guide list.
Oh, okay. Grower's license is obvious. It's how much there's a type A, B, and C in that license format for how many plants you can grow. So that one's pretty easily done. I beg your pardon?
Is that personal use?
No, personal use is totally separate from this discussion. Personal use is just carve it out and set it aside for right now. People are allowed to possess certain amounts of cannabis. They're allowed to have it in their possession. The statute's real clear on where and how, and that the village cannot touch. So we're not, I just want you to set that aside. Transporter licenses are not called for in the recreational statute with definitions, so those will be defined by the Marijuana Regulatory Agency. So I expect a heavy dose of the rules to include what that is. Testing facilities are exactly that. They're testing the grade of marijuana, how much active ingredients are in it. They make certain certifications as to the potency of the marijuana that's sold in various establishments. Then there'll be retail licenses allowed. And there's another undefined, which again is sort of frustrating, as I say, I don't know, but there's going to be other licenses as described by the rules. So we don't know what those may or may not be. But Director Brisboe was pretty confident he was going to be able to define in much greater detail the transport licenses.
Can I chime in on transporter? While the village could prohibit or regulate having a transporter located here, we will not be able to prohibit transporters from crossing our boundaries. Otherwise, we'd have a big interference if, you can't drive through Livonia, you can't drive through the village. So we can't stop an otherwise lawful transporter from transiting through our community.
Yes. Do you want to, and we're only doing this so that the people at home can figure out what we're saying.
So just to clarify, a transporter, if I wanted to buy some, they could come here and sell it to me, but they don't have to be located selling here, or their business?
No, transporter is just moving marijuana from point A to point B. For example, from the grower to the retailer.
Right. You can't, it's not like a food cart where they can stop and sell.
Right, where I know
So-
they have those in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, they do, yes, they do.
Yeah, they do.
So here it would just be somebody who's taking it generally from the growing facility, transporting it across communities to a retail, for example, or to a testing lab.
Thank you.
Yes.
It's open for only questions or statements as well.
You can, yeah, it's open, it's an open dialogue, so whichever you wish.
All right, first I'll start off with a question on marijuana retailer. It says a person licensed to obtain marijuana from marijuana establishments and sell to otherwise transfer marijuana to marijuana establishments and to individuals over the age of 21. Would that be considered like a delivery service?
No, that part of the ordinance, again, is directed at the individual possession of marijuana. So we're not,
Is there any idea for a delivery service? Because I feel like that would cause a lot more safer transports of marijuana and prevent a lot of people from doing illegal things to obtain marijuana.
my guess, this is a guess on my part, I've been in enough meetings with Director Brisboe that he indicated that they would probably do that in the rules that are going to come out in June. But I don't know that for a fact because I haven't seen the rules yet.
And then the other statement I actually had was I used to be a grower in California and just see job growth and how much money I was able to make makes it well worth legalizing just because it was able to bring me out of being completely poor and actually being able to start a savings account. Thank you.
Well,
Joe, can I ask a question before he goes any farther?
Sure.
You said micro business. What falls under micro business?
we don't know yet.
I mean, what would a dispensary fall under? What would somebody who wants to deliver it from the dispensary?
Dispensary is going to be the retail, aspect of it. A micro business is not well defined, other than it will be a vertically integrated situation where up to 150 plants can be grown, processed, tested, I'm assuming tested, and then sold right out of that business location. But since the Marijuana Regulation Authority has to put those rules in place, I don't really have a good handle yet as to how that business will look.
Which one of these 6 licenses would you put it under?
It's going to have its own license.
So there's going to be a 7th that doesn't exist yet.
Yes.
Okay.
Or 8 or 9.
Or 52, I get it.
Or whatever. I think they're trying to keep the number of licenses down, just so that there's not that much confusion. But I haven't seen the rules yet, so I can't speak to that yet.
Thank you.
Mo, if I might, just to provide some context from the medical marijuana side, I've worked with other locations in which the applicants for medical marijuana within one building have a grow facility, a processing facility, and a provisioning center. The state in the medical marijuana specifically says they must be separate entities in terms of entrances and exits. They have to be controlled specifically that way, even if they are within one building on one particular site. So for medical marijuana, they do that. And another way, aspect, just in terms of the differences that the state regulatory can do, is that they've had a tendency to what they do is called stack licensing for growers, because the growers are based on a number of plants. However, they've seen fit to, in certain locations, not in all, but in certain locations, allow for the stacking of licensing for growing, meaning a person can have 2 Class C licenses for growing.
Thank you. It's clear as mud.
It is, yes, it is.
I think you stole my line.
President?
Let Chris moderate. Let's just sit back. I'm going to let Chris moderate.
Oh, Chris, if you please.
Sit back and listen.
All right. Thank you very much. My name is Gary Douglas. I am the current chairman of the Village of Oxford Planning Commission. And so I have some procedural questions I would like to bring up. We met approximately a month ago in joint session between the distinguished members of the Village Council and my esteemed partners on the commission. And we talked about some of this in a little less than vague terms. And we acted upon a timeline at that time that we had understood and believed that it was certainly longer than what we're faced with. And so back then in April, when we agreed to accept a moratorium on allowing commercial licenses to be located inside the village limits of Oxford, we felt like we had better than a year, or almost a year, I should say, to be able to draft that set of ordinances and submit them to the council, and also to allow time for public comment and et cetera, et cetera. Suddenly, I find that that timeline has been cut back significantly by maybe up to 6 months. And so that fills me with a great deal of concern, because I feel like our ability to be able to create a very high-quality product for you now has become somewhat limited. And Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's very likely that we could see the village be deluged with applications as soon as September.
Well,
And that's
if we don't
literally a
have, if
few
we don't
months
have
away.
something in place, the state will grant the licenses.
Exactly. And so that's my concern, is that I think that under our present circumstances, which is a 6-month moratorium that would run from April to May, June, July, August, September, until September, that's our 6-month moratorium that we accepted at that time, with the possibility of perhaps making an extension. I think that I would request the council please reconsider that original moratorium and perhaps adopt some other type of delaying strategy to allow us, as your commission, to really work very diligently on this and prepare a very good quality product for you in a time frame that doesn't drive us crazy, but also allows us time to be able to create a great product for you. And I'm hoping that as time goes on, perhaps there's an opportunity to see the work product of other communities that are also working on this, that we can then use as a framework and as a guideline for us to be able to put together a package that would suit us very, very well. So that would be my request to the council. Not only do I always request guidance in terms of what direction you want us to go in. Chris mentioned, Chris, correct? Is that right?
Correct.
Thank you, Chris. Up to right now 6, maybe 7, maybe 52 licenses that are going to be available. Is there a subset of those that you want to consider, or do you want something for all of them? I would prefer to have as much guidance from the council as possible, so that we know, as we've had our members state in the past, having direction and having a solid target to be able to shoot at is really very, very helpful for us, so that we know exactly what you want and can try to satisfy that. And that's the extent of my comments. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Andy Reed. I'm wondering what the benefit would be from the aspect of allowing marijuana retail sales of things and businesses in our village and township, from a monetary position, from a tourist position. I would think that these types of locations would really attract people to break into them. They would have to be secured. I don't know what kind of garbage or things that come out of that, what the byproducts are. Those byproducts have to be handled in a very special way. If they could be something the kids could get into, if there is some kind of aroma sense, filtration. I know that growing marijuana, I understand, has got all kinds of issues with it as far as what comes out of it, what goes into the air, whether they're making the oils out of it, whether they're making foods or products or things of that nature. I would myself recommend personally that hold off and make it so that we don't want any licenses in our village. Give it 6 months or a year, or see what happens in the surrounding areas, because we know there's going to be a flood of it in the area. Unless we really want to make sure that we have people that can come and buy pot here in our town and compete with the bars, the restaurants, and the other places for real estate. But unless there's a value in higher taxes or something else that's really bringing some value or quality to the village, I really don't think that it's something that we should jump on the bandwagon and say, sure, let's have all this going. No matter if they make a lot of money or not, I don't know if that would be revenue back to us as a township or a village, or if it's just gonna bring in a crowd of people we might not really want to have coming here into our community. That's all I have.
You know, I might make a quick comment on that. If there, it's the retailer license. If there are retail licenses in the village, some of the tax money will be given back to, on a prorated basis, to the retail licenses in a community. But I do want to point out that there is a very complex formula in the statute as to where the money goes that's collected by the state of Michigan. First off, in the first 2 years of the tax that's collected, $20 million goes to research. And then the next category of where money goes is the state of Michigan itself. So all the regulation of the marijuana businesses will be paid for out of that fund first. As of 2 months ago, Andrew Brisboe indicated at a meeting that he had 180 employees already. So a lot of money will be going to fund that. And then there's a formula that says counties get so much, the local village gets so much, roads get so much. But, you know, after a while, your particular share will be limited to how many establishments you allow in the village itself that are retail establishments. So,
And Chris, there's no clear indication, like what that timeline would be. It could be 2 years from now, it could be 10 years from now, correct? We just don't know.
When we would start.
When
seeing
we
money.
would start, if we
Right.
allowed, when would we start seeing revenue?
Most likely a couple of years.
yeah. It was interesting, just for your information, the medical marijuana had an excise tax that the local units of government that signed up for it were going to be eligible for. But the statute, the rec statute passed and it eliminated that tax. So a number of communities that thought they were going to get the benefit of the excise tax on medical marijuana are no longer going to receive that. So it turned out to be about a 3-month window.
So 180 employees at $50,000 to $70,000 apiece, are already $1.5 million right there, coming right off the top of $20 million for research in the research facility. So what I was thinking is, from the aspect of the lottery, which is going to fix our roads and pay for our schools aren't getting any funding, it's dropping off, and our roads are really in bad shape. So I really wouldn't think that the state of Michigan is going to pour money into our township or our village, because we allow people to be selling pot here. But that's my.
But it's, yeah, it just gets tied to the retail, and in terms of the formula that was adopted in the statute.
We do get to charge a licensing fee annually up to $5,000. So that revenue would be direct to the village.
It would be re-upped every year for each facility.
Yes, and you can use that for designated law enforcement purposes and whatnot, to cover your costs. You can't just charge it, you have to justify it. But it's up to $5,000.
Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Brandon Barber. Pardon my attire, and I know I look like I'm a part of the riffraff, but yeah, I didn't know it was a little kind of formal here. So I just want to come up here and make a quick statement. When it comes down to, like, when you guys are talking about revenue, I believe it would be very, very beneficial for you guys to allow access for people to grow, to buy licenses and everything. When it comes to supply and demand, it seems to always be in demand, and it's something people can already get, and we should take advantage of it. and just, for example, look at the market and look at other people's success. But, you know, I don't know. That's about all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Joan Reed, and I moved here in 2006. My husband and I purchased a Victorian home right downtown here. I'm just a little nervous, so excuse my speech and everything. I just want to get it off my chest. I'm retired from the school district, and I now work in the public school system, and I now work in the medical field. And I am aware that this is not about whether we're for pot or against pot. It's about community. It's about our community and how hard everybody has worked here to bring this community up to a nice looking standard and to keep building on that. It's about the people that live here. It's about the children that live here. It's about the people who visit here. That's what it's about. I have a vested interest in here. I am working really hard to make my house look nice on the outside and on the inside. But I love this community, and I really think it has a lot going for it. I wonder if any of you on these boards have ever gone to any of these places, visited any cannabis growers, any retail stores, because I can tell you, I went to a store, and I urge you to go there. I urge you to visit and ask yourself, what does this bring to the community? What does it look like? Sit there in the parking lot and watch the people come on in. You know, do you see a few people doing a little vape in their car? Did they buy an edible? Because they can eat it. They can hang around your park here, that you work so hard for all those events and made it look so beautiful, and you want to invite more people to your community here. One thing that I do know from the medical place that I work at, people will travel a far distance, a very far distance. You have no control where they're coming from and who these people are. I'm not saying that they're all bad, I'm not saying that they're all good, but you're going to get some people that aren't going to be desirable to this community. I would hope that you would not make anything in this walking area of this downtown area at all. I mean, it would just make me sick if you did. I would want to probably move out of here. That's not the type of community that I moved into at all. And I just really love what you guys have going here, and you're really working really hard to make it a nice, clean family atmosphere. We're excited about a hospital that's coming. We don't know where, but that has a positive impact on our community. And you know it does. We can't say that about any of this growing. We can't say any about this retail. You just got to question it. So I really urge you guys to go visit some places. I'm sure that if you called these places ahead of time, they'd let you come in and you could look at it, but look at the community around it and the people that are going there. And if nothing else, I urge you to think about the children under 18 years of age and how it will affect them. To be able to see that every day. Maybe in 10 years, it'll be just an everyday thing, but we don't have to jump on the bandwagon right now. We can change it later. But think about those children. That's what we are responsible for in this community, at the very least, as taxpayers and planners. We are responsible for our kids here. I wouldn't walk my grandkids down here if I thought that somebody was smoking pot and they could get a contact buzz. No way. We haven't made a law that I've heard of that, yeah, you can smoke pot in your house, you can smoke it out of sight, you can smoke it in front of your kids, because there's no law that says that you have to be so many feet away from those children. Well, you gotta think about the kids, if nothing else. It's not gonna make us rich, but please, think about it for our community, our downtown. We're working so hard for it. And it's looking more beautiful every day.
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Brian Cloutier. I'll just state that I don't live here anymore. I don't have any skin in the game. But I will tell you, as the director of one of your largest public services in the community, I like to think that I do, and that what I have to share with you matters. You know, I loved the 9 years that I called Oxford home. I enjoyed every minute of it. I appreciated the opportunity to get involved in this community outside of the public library, but as a resident, sitting on the planning commission and sitting where you sit this evening. When I stepped down to move back to my hometown, I never thought that I would be standing in this town having this dialogue. You had the opportunity at your last meeting to opt out. That didn't mean necessarily that you couldn't opt in the future. It just gave you the opportunity, without spending taxpayers' dollars in this community and without putting yourself in legal jeopardy, to have the dialogue. But you put the cart before the horse here. And it is a condition that I ask, you know, have you bothered to go downtown and ask your local merchants whether they want it in their community next door to them? I don't think you probably have. I'm going to guess you haven't. Maybe you have. You might surprise me, but I doubt it. With that being said, you had an opportunity and a window to do this the right way. I don't know why you felt like you needed to be on the cutting edge of this, because there are other communities that could give you the guidance that you need to make some sound decisions here. And I'm kind of embarrassed to say that you're the town council.
Thank you, Brian. And I will remind you, Mr. Cloutier, and the rest of the public, that at the very beginning of this process, this council said there's a lot of unknowns. And this is part of gathering those unknowns and part of understanding what the community needs. We were not going to jump the gun into a process that, frankly, nobody has dealt with. And there's a lot of communities that went straight to banning it without this process, without having this conversation with our residents. So I appreciate your comments. I am quite proud and I'm honored to serve with these individuals. And we're here to listen. That's part of the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'm just going to speak as a resident tonight. So Kate Logan, 10 Crawford. I'm also very proud to be on council as well. But so I just want to kind of debunk a couple of the things that were said today about marijuana. First of all, I think we've got to fight a stigma here. And I said this before when we had our meeting with the Planning Commission as well. I think obviously some people are looking at this like, this is a new generation, like we're pushing this agenda, we're trying to be cutting edge or whatever. That's not true. People have been smoking marijuana since the beginning of time, okay? It's just that it hasn't been legal before. Now it's legal, now let's find a place for it because that's our job. That's what we need to do here. So I want to ask those people that think that it is going to bring some kind of negative perception to our downtown, what you expect to do with the empty businesses then? What do you want me to do about the grungy liquor stores that I'm looking at? Because no one here has ever conveyed their concern about the amount of alcohol that is distributed in our town or that's available to our children. But I will say, the last time I checked, as of the 2014 stats I just looked up, over 37,000 million Americans, or 31,000 Americans died of some type of alcohol overdose, but there have been 0 documented deaths because of marijuana. So, I mean, if you're going to pick your poison, and if we're really truly worried about the safety of the children, I would rather them be smoking cannabis. Also, out of the 113 communities in Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb County, 100 of them voted yes on Proposal 1. So as a council member, I have to make the decision to vote against the will of my constituents. That's not what they asked us to be lawmakers to do. Another fact I want to talk about is the revenue, because it seemed a little bit hazy on that, but from what I understand is what they're predicting by 2022 and 2023, the tax revenue is going to be about $262 million. And I'm going to look at every opportunity that there is to bring a revenue stream into this community. Now, that being said, I have walked into dispensaries before. I know what it looks like when it's done right, which is something that we can do. We can't control the fact that it is legal. So if you don't like the smell of marijuana, maybe you should go talk to your neighbors, because they're going to be smoking it anyways. It's legal. There's nothing you can do about it. So what we need to do is look at what we can do responsibly and how we can regulate it the right way. So we can control what that looks like. Because I don't want to miss opportunities and look back on it and think, wow, we really look like 1930s, you know, post-prohibition. Like, you know, this is the times, it has been the times. If people, I mean, the fact that it's legal now and there's not swarms of people walking around downtown Oxford smoking pot tells you that just because we adopt some kind of retail shop into our community doesn't mean that this is going to be a hash bash 2020 in Oxford, Michigan. It's not what this is going to look like, folks. It's just going to be done responsibly. And one of the things that we did talk about in the Planning Commission and the Village Council joint meeting is the fact that if you give them the ability to have a retail shop in our downtown versus banning it, which I can make so many comparisons on what that does to a society when you repress them versus allowing it, and what the outcomes of that look like. But, so if you give them a way to purchase it legally, that is taxed, that is regulated and controlled, right, by us, in essence, they're maybe less likely to go ahead and grow it in their backyard or try to grow it in their basement. And the thing about marijuana is it's a finicky plant, so it needs a lot of moisture, it needs a lot of light. More lighting lamps or heating lamps is going to mean more risk for fires in your home. That's more work for my fire chief. More moisture is going to need more black mold and mildew, which means the value of your homes are going down because your neighbor's half his house is destroyed from damage. So we need to think about this, not as in a, you know, do I want it around me? Do I want, it's around you, it has been, you know what I mean? It's just legal now. So I would say let's encourage the thought process behind, okay, so there's nothing we can do about it, it's legal, what do we want it to look like here? Because I think that that's the conversation I would like to personally see happen versus, I don't want this in my town, like this is, you know, we're small, quaint little town, but we're a small, quaint little town with people that are gonna be growing pot in the backyard. So I say, let's take a responsible look at how we control the distribution and the retail of it. Because like I said before, I would be much more concerned about the appearance of yet another dingy looking liquor or beer store versus a marijuana store. And real quick, because I know I got on my soapbox. But, you know, as far as what it looks like when it's done right, I do have a friend from high school who moved out to San Francisco, and I know that's kind of the progressive mecca. We're not there yet. However, the store he runs is called Harborside. If you ever look it up online, it's actually one of the largest distributors in the state of California. It looks like an IKEA. It's beautiful inside. It's like the IKEA of weed. He has a 401k and he makes 6 figures. It's fantastic. All the employees, it's like 100% job satisfaction rate, which probably, I know why, but you know, it's just, there are ways that you can do it right. I think the stigma behind marijuana is that it's going to bring in this dingy, cruddy group of people and it's going to look like horrible. And I mean, again, it sounds very convoluted and it's intimidating to approach this because now we're like, how many licenses are there? Like okay, well, for comparison, how many beer and liquor licenses are there? That doesn't seem to faze us. We're used to drinking. We're just not used to smoking yet. We'll get there, folks. If it's not in this room here tonight, it'll be in the next 5 to 10 years, and by then we'll be behind the ball. But that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
Hi, Lynn Dillon, 51 West Burdick. I have one question. If you're going to control what comes in and how it looks, you can't even clean up a dingy liquor store. You have no control over it. What leads you to believe that whomever comes in is going to be pretty productive and contributing to society when you already have a dingy liquor store no one can control?
Yes, sir.
I'm Jack Curtis, Village Planning Commission, Oxford Township trustee. I have a question for both Chris and Bob. You made a statement. If this board, in its moratorium, comes up with an ordinance, or doesn't come up with an ordinance, or decides to opt out, and the state gets all the regulations put together, what can the state do? Can the state come here and say, you can have one? If they get 11,000 applicants?
Okay, they just grant the license.
License.
So unless there is a system of regulation in place by the village,
Yes.
the state will grant a license.
Okay,
So,
just like.
Using the state criteria. So let's say we don't have anything in place. Let's say we just don't do anything. Somebody applies to the state, they grant the license, and they impose their the state, so we have no control. And I think what you were just saying is, let's get ahead of it and get control over it. If we have a prohibitive ordinance that gets filed with the state, they will not issue a license until we're ready.
Until you're ready.
If you repeal and get your ordinances in place.
Okay, I was told, and Chris, I'm glad you're here, that it's gonna be sort of like the liquor license. That's why you ended up in the year 2000 or 1999 when they allowed liquor sales at gas stations. They changed the law. You couldn't buy liquor in gas stations. All of a sudden, boom, they changed the law.
Yep.
If we don't have an ordinance finitely defined what area marijuana can be sold in, let's just pick C2 for a dispensary. Somebody might come here and file an application through the state, and the state will say, well, you know what? Yeah, it's taken them too long, they can have one.
Your opportunity right now is to regulate time, place, and manner.
So with us trying to plan it and put it in an area, in some place, we would circumvent the state coming in and say, well, you can put it anywhere you want.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Katie's right. She's saying that she wants to regulate this some area that you would say this is it, so that the state doesn't come in and say, okay, now you can sell liquor at your gas stations. Think about that. The reason they didn't allow that in state liquor license was you could drive up and buy liquor and drive away and drink. So restricting where or having ordinance in places to do those things is pretty smart on the Village Council Planning Commission, so that you do have first-hand grasp of it before the state comes in and says you can do this. Then all of a sudden it's Katie by the door, you get 10 applicants, they're forcing it on you. Pretty soon it succumbs to, well, okay, we gotta have it everywhere. My point is, there are 312 possible pounds of marijuana that can be grown in this room with the 26 people that are in here right now, in your backyards. 300, my calculator's over there. There's 26 people, you can each grow 12 plants, and if you got a pound to plant, that's how much marijuana just us in this room can grow. I'm thinking that Johnny and Susie on a Saturday night want to have a hot tub party, so they go to a dispensary, pick up a little bit and go home. Everybody else is trying to grow theirs because they can't go to a dispensary and grow it. I'm trying to avoid this onslaught of growing uncontrolled. I've heard prominent people say, well, I'm going to grow a pot of that in my backyard and see if I can do it or not. And I'm going, I don't want 300 pounds in my neighborhood being grown for anybody to have access with. If you can prevent that by having the person that wants just a little bit for the weekend, that's pretty smart planning. But having this law is, I don't know, I can't even explain it. To grow 12 plants of marijuana everywhere in the village you want, right next door to a church, but you can't put a dispensary 250 feet to a church, but you can grow 12 plants next to a church. I can grow 12 plants next to a school. It's a law. But if this village grasps that and puts some sort of control on it, we would then be prepared when the state came in and said, hey, you've got 10 licenses, applications here in the village. So I know the law is crazy as heck, and I just can't see everybody in the world growing pot in Oxford.
As you mentioned, though, it's still a possibility that people could do that, so
Yes, it is.
you could get out ahead of that situation as you described.
Thank you.
Just another interesting fact, the actual statute does not say whether that's 12 per person or 12 per household, which is kind of an interesting question. I think that'll get decided in litigation as well. I think we can assume 12 per person just is probably the most likely result, but
Yes.
that's a guess on my part, not a certainty.
I just want to say where I'm coming from. I started working for the village when I was 17 years old, 1985. It's been like 3,000 years since then. But I grew up thinking and planning that if it was legal, you allowed it. You decide where you want it to be. It doesn't always have to be at Burdick and 24. The only use that I believe we don't allow in the village is heavy stamping. And that's because the proximity to residential, to the heavy stamping, would be noise, it just wouldn't work. We allow strip clubs, we allow adult bookstore, we allow, every use is in our zoning ordinance. Not necessarily on a piece of property that's vacant, not necessarily on a piece of property that's available, but it's an allowable use with restrictions, with requirements. And if we enforce it and it's done right, we should, if it's legal, we should allow it. I firmly believe everything has its place and we need to find a place for this. And that's just me.
Is there any, oh, sure.
Question that I had brought up was, even if this passes, they can't change the state law that we are allowed to grow ourselves, correct?
Correct. As I tried to indicate before, all the regulations in the law that pertain to individual growing, use, and possession are totally separate from what we're talking about today.
So the only thing that people against us are trying to get rid of is revenue for the city, for the state, for the roads, and creating jobs for the people in the city who, like me personally, I'm only working part-time, and having another job opportunity like this would be something that I would look real forward to.
Well, the ones that the village could regulate were the 6 that they specifically talk about in the statute, and then other types of marijuana establishments that are found in the new rules and regulations which haven't been published yet. Maybe I'll just go through them one more time. The technical terms in here are the marijuana growers. Again, I think that's obvious what they do. The safety compliance facility is a testing facility that I mentioned before. Its purposes are to test the marijuana, certify grades, and that sort of thing. Processor is removing the active ingredients from the marijuana so you can make other products like the edibles. Then there's the micro business, and I wish I had a better definition for you about what a micro business is going to be, but they talk about up to 150 plants in a vertical situation where you're growing, you're processing, and possibly testing. I don't know what the new rule's going to actually provide for, but it's a vertically integrated system. The retailer is obvious. That's the place where you can go buy marijuana. And the secure transporter is, again, moving the marijuana from the grower to the retailer, or maybe the secured testing facility, so, or maybe to the processor. Again, I'll need some more, I'll need to really look at the rules and regulations when the state gives those to us in June, so, but I have a feeling they'll track as much as they can with the medical marijuana statute and the rules and regulations there, so, and those are pretty strict rules.
Thank you.
This lady out here
I'm sorry.
had her hand up. Did you want to speak?
I just had a question. Is there,
Thank you.
Nice try.
We're just trying to make sure everybody
You were
gets.
trying to avoid that, I think.
Angela Profan, I live at 4 Park Street. Is there, and I may have missed it in the beginning, is there like a limit on how many within the village or the township are allowed?
The statute says they may limit the number of marijuana establishments within its boundaries. I would say the common sense reading of that sentence is that you can probably limit the number of them and the types of establishments as well. Does this village need a big grow operation or not? Does it need retail establishments or not? You know, those are questions you have to decide as a community. Certainly the municipal league isn't going to make those kind of decisions on your behalf. I do want to caution you, though, that that is different than the statute that regulates medical marijuana facilities, where it says that the local community can regulate the number and types of establishments. But this is an initiative that was passed by the people as opposed to a statute that was carefully drafted and went through the legislative process. So I would argue that when it says, or limit the number of marijuana establishments within its boundaries, that means the types of facilities too. So maybe you would want the testing facility, for example, but not necessarily the processing facility because it might have different detrimental effects. Right. So really, I think you need to take a look at the types of licenses that are available in the statute and whatever else gets created in the rules and regulations, and then carefully sift through them and say, does it belong here in Oxford or not?
And if it was adopted, as to his point, would it be unchanged then? It's like he's saying things change and the state could come in and say, now we're going to do this, or would that end up being?
No, not if you've enacted your controls. So when you get into the fundamentals here, so when we talk about controlling it, we're talking about where are we going to allow it and what are we going to allow? What time can it open? What time can it close? How many square feet does the facility need to be a grower? How many square feet would we like it to be if it's a retail? What kind of signage? What kind of hours of operation? Those are the things we would put into zoning ordinances for lots of different uses. And that's what we're talking about here tonight, is if you're going to have these facilities in your community, which ones do you want to allow, and how do you want to allow them, and get some control over them so that the state cannot do what you're thinking, change the rules on you in the future. And that's what I think, what's that guy's name? Is that Jack, or does he go by Curtis? He's got like 2 first names. Yeah, so what he was saying is that when they were dealing with liquor, then all of a sudden the state decided to put it in gas stations. They didn't go to the local zoning boards and say, hey, do you want liquor in your gas stations? They just did it. And that's what you're trying to address here, yeah.
Is to put in for that. Okay.
Yes. Chris, I have a question regarding the way that the statute includes certain boundaries. And, for instance, if you're so far from a school or I know it addresses a school, so if you could remind us, what that distance is from the school. Does it also address any other particular uses, daycare facilities or, school buildings other than schools, administrative buildings? Does it address places of worship, things of that nature?
Well, you do have the, the recommend, that they start off with being no establishments in areas that are zoned wholly residential. So we start with that. So if you folks look at your maps, and you look at all the areas in yellow, and I don't know what that orange color is, but I know that's one of them. Those are residential areas. So you can't have an establishment in a residential area. And then there's some indication that you know, the state would look at 1,000 feet from any school, but you're probably allowed to come down from that in your own regulations to what would be reasonable for you. I did uncover an ordinance where it was 250 feet.
Harrisville?
Yeah, I sent that out to everybody so that you would have advance of. But 1,000 feet of a pre-existing public or private school providing education in kindergarten or any grades 1 through 12, unless you adopt an ordinance that reduces that requirement. So the law kind of speaks to being able to reduce it. Other than that, I don't know if there's any.
Those are the only regulations.
I see, okay.
See, the reason I like this lawyer is he agrees with me that we don't know everything. I'm so glad you're here, because I've been saying it and they've been going, why don't you know? I go, because I don't know.
I think Allison had a question too.
Chris, you know, Bob sent us out the sample ordinance from Harrisville that went through, you know, part of what they regulated was what the establishment looked like, security, odor control, and what their signs could contain. But for the benefit of the audience, would you talk us through what zoning options, what we have to put on, what zoning laws we have to put in place to regulate what it looks like and how they could affect other businesses?
I haven't seen the Harrisville ordinance, so maybe.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I think what you can do is what all of your ordinances do with other uses. You allow certain activities and you control the signage, you control the hours of operation, you can control sometimes the facade, you can control all aspects of it. So whatever the planning commission is allowed to do for any use in terms of zoning authority, every zoning ordinance you enact is cloaked with a certain presumption of validity unless challenged. So unless you do something that's just like way out unreasonable, your zoning ordinance is generally going to be cloaked with some authority. So governing hours of operation, yes. Governing square footage requirements, yes. Governing days of operation, yes. Governing parking issues, yes. All of those things, all the way down to height and building requirements in terms of security, doors, exits, windows, venting, odors, the same way you would regulate a hair salon in terms of venting mechanisms, whatever you deem is appropriate. And I think the point that Kate was making was that let's do that instead of having somebody else do that upon us.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
From our last joint meeting that we had, I had a really long time to take a really good look at kind of a lot of the rules and get really well educated about what different communities are doing or not doing, or really trying to get a really good understanding of what does this mean. And one of the things that personally I'm not opposed to having in my community. Personally, I'm not opposed to having this, but at the same time, I want to do it and I want to do it right and I want to do it correctly. And one of the things that maybe that help, Bob, if you can help clear this up for me, based on our current terms, right, our moratorium, is that we have to be working towards creating ordinance right now as we speak.
Yes.
Correct? And the Michigan is supposed to be putting in or giving us guidelines or regulations here in June. Some sort of draft, right?
Right, emergency rules are expected right around the 1st of June.
Right around the 1st of June. So that means, and so I believe if correctly, it's September the 1st is where we would have to have an ordinance put into place.
Whatever date they ultimately decide on to accept applications by the state.
Right now, they're saying September 1st.
Yeah, but they've made that clear in terms of, they're much more likely to be able to make the June 1st deadline with the emergency rules, and they're not as confident about September 1 for accepting applications. They made that clear too. They're shooting for it, but they're not guaranteeing it.
Okay.
But I think, just again, if you have your ordinance in place by September 1, you'll be okay. Which, if you are working toward it right now, as you're working toward, listening to the discussion here.
So that would give us June, all of June, July, August, and so that would give us about 3 months. Is 3 months enough time for us to put in a really great ordinance? Maybe that's a question. Maybe another thing is, how long does it take, or how long of a process does it take for the state of Michigan to look at and review an application?
They will have 90 days from the date that the application is submitted. And they expect a deluge on whatever day that's going to be, so.
Otherwise, I think it's deemed approved if they don't act in 90 days.
So it'll be a 90-day window, and applicant A submits on, say, September 1st, they'll have a license within 90 days. Or a denial based on the state's criteria or on some local criteria.
But I think I know where you're headed with your question. Let me make sure that you can't wait till an application is in place and waiting its 90-day review to try to stick your ordinances. You need to have the ordinances done before the application is accepted by the state of Michigan. You can't ordinance it out during that process.
It'll be a non-conforming use, for example, which is permitted under Michigan law.
Perfect, thank you. And another question that I have is based on, from what a little bit more that I've been researching on, is that that they'll be considering businesses that currently exist and have medical licenses will be the first to be able to review applications before non-medical licenses that have been approved?
For certain types of the licenses, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thanks, Justin.
It was my understanding that a moratorium was essentially us placing a pause
Yes.
on allowing a business to go in. Now, does the state recognize that we have a moratorium, or is it just a yes or no, cut or dry regarding the state?
As we discussed at our meeting, moratoriums have been legally recognized and accepted in municipal law, so long as you're showing action. Remember, I cautioned that you can't just set a moratorium and do nothing. Now, 6 months and maybe up to a year have been ruled acceptable moratoriums. But I think you remember I cautioned against the moratorium process because I think it has inroads into it, litigation-wise. But now that we know that we're going to get the regs in June and that you might want to be ready by September, that gives you more guidance than we had. I think when we were at our last meeting, I said, I think the regs are coming out in June. I think you'll have to be ready by December, remember? And now we're hearing my June date was probably right, but the December date might still be right, but it might be earlier.
Right, that's correct.
We don't know.
The state will decide on that process, and they're telling us at this point they're shooting for the first part of September. But they also made it clear that that might change. That's the latest information I have. But it's significantly different than the information I had 2 months ago, which was it doesn't look like there'll be anything in place until December, so.
I just want to clear up where you might be going with that. If they put the moratorium in place May 1st, do they have a full 6 months to have something, or is the state going to say, no, September, we're done whether you are or not? I think we bought ourselves 6 months covered, correct?
Well, it happens to work out perfect.
Well, what if our 6 months is they're ready a month before our moratorium is up? That's my point.
You are
Still give them the full
You
6
are in
months.
danger land at that juncture.
The moratorium.
I cannot guarantee you litigation-wise.
I think we're kind of
You know,
right here.
you know what you may want to do is formally adopt the moratorium in an ordinance as opposed to a resolution.
We did a resolution.
But I would go with an ordinance that you file with the state. That way, they have something concrete in their hands, not to grant the license until the time is up.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the thing, but when you're talking June, now September, then like, well, what if we thought we had 6 months, but now maybe we don't. So I think that's kind of what,
I'm guessing you will not have a full 6 months till December. I think they might miss the September 1.
6 months might ran out of November. I'm not exactly sure when we passed it, but still.
Probably
April 16th.
So April, there you go. So 10/16 was 6 months for us.
I mean, the September 1st accepting applications date is
a big deal.
And it's a little loose. My prediction, November, you might predict October. I don't think they're going to make September. So,
But just in terms of the review and approval process, I would fathom to ensure the utmost protection with any ordinance we adopt, it would have to become effective by September 1st.
yes.
Meaning if it's effective September 1st, it has to be published at least 15 days prior to that, meaning council action would have taken some action prior to those 15 days, meaning that it would have to have a first and second reading?
Yes.
First and second reading at the council. So those are the regularly scheduled council meetings. And then it also has to get received by the planning commission, received at the council from the planning commission.
Right.
After the planning commission has a public hearing, which is at a minimum of 15 days prior to that. So that, as the planner working on the ordinance, that schedule is in my head. So those are the number of days that are a part of the review and approval process, not part of the ordinance creation process.
How many days is that, Mario?
I'm looking like we'd have to have
25?
July would be the day, the first planning commission meeting in July, I think, would be our drop dead day for the planning commission to send something to the, well, to schedule a public hearing.
Well, the council could adopt an opt-out ordinance of everything and then work during that time frame to fashion whatever ordinance you have, then repeal the opt-out and adopt the new regulations simultaneously.
Correct. That's one of the next things I would say is like under our curtain, because we have a moratorium adopted by resolution, those are the days that need to be getting into. So at a minimum, yeah, we're talking like late June, early July for some type of ordinance in whole form.
I know you were standing there as I was reading, but I just want to explain why I am not for opting out. This village has, historically, for the last 35 years I worked here, if we set something aside, we won't get back to it. It gets set aside, we never do the regulations, we never get back. This is something that has to be dealt with. And if we opt out, we're never going to deal with it. If we want to do a moratorium by ordinance, I'm fine with that. But to opt out means this village is just going to sit back, never get back to it. Next thing you know, it'll be 2030, and we'll still be sitting here going, yeah, look at the back of this agenda. It looks like one time we were going to talk about marijuana, and we never did it. Let's discuss it now. Let's get the planning commission, the village council on point, make a decision, in, out, go. That's my opinion.
This question's for Mario. Mario, when you're talking about drafting an ordinance, it's not just the ordinance, correct? It's the ordinance to allow these things or not allow these things, but it's also amendments to the zoning to make those operational, correct? So there's really two pieces that have to be drafted, if you will. No matter what direction that you go, banning it outright or allowing anything, there's still two pieces. It's the actual ordinance that legislates it, and then there's the zoning piece that details it, correct?
Actually, the way it would work is that, from my understanding, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, the zoning ordinance is the main focus of the regulations that would be governing the facilities, their location, their hours of operation. You know, I would even get into the review approval criteria, that sort of thing. That's all a zoning ordinance amendment that would go into the existing zoning ordinance, and that's what the Planning Commission would be working on. Anything else that the city, the village would like to do in terms of regulating it? For example, if we wanted to create a business license for them, we probably would have to do that in order to collect the $5,000 fee. That would be a general law ordinance. That would be a separate ordinance that deals with those issues. You know, other communities have gone for medical marijuana. They've adopted the criteria for specific priority of certain projects. For example, but you know, that's medical marijuana. I'm not sure how that could be dealt with on the recreational side. But that's a possibility. But I think when it comes to what we've been discussing, majority of those issues would be dealt with from a zoning standpoint.
Agreed.
But, so.
Sounds like some things working out legally there, but once again, I'm thinking from the aspect of the community, what my wife brought up as well, is, you know, if you're thinking that you would like to bring this into our town, which I really am opposed to, and I grew up in the 60s, I don't remember the 70s and all that cool stuff, but I look at, you know, what it would do to the community, the kids, and that. One of the things Joni pointed out was that we're going to have to look at regulating. If people can legally smoke marijuana, that's fine. Where do they smoke cigarettes? Start thinking about, you can't smoke it in the park, you can't smoke it at the beach, you can't smoke it in the areas where there's children, because you have contact buzz, you have other aspects and concerns about other people that are innocents that could be affected or implicated. When you go to a bar and drink, or you go outside and have a drink, your kids don't get stoned. You get drunk, your kids don't. So, think about that very hard. The other aspect as well is from the community, I don't see it as being a huge money drain. I don't see it a big revenue generator. I saw the lottery was going to fix the roads in the schools. You know what? That money's in the general fund and gone. To sit back and think that Michigan is going to give us money from the state of Michigan and what we've seen in the general fund, I really highly doubt that anybody seriously considers they're going to make a boatload of money passing legislation to be able to bring pot into their town and expect the state's going to share taxes with them. $5,000 a year, that means you're going to do what, 10 different businesses, $50,000? Is that a big drop in the bucket for what our operating budget is? I think not. So from that aspect, I really don't think that it's something that I would like to see in my community. I got a lot of friends that went to Vietnam, died in Vietnam, a lot of people that I've seen go through this and go through a lot of other things, and they have got a lot of war stories on people that have done a lot of things. I don't have anything against marijuana. I just don't want to see that we're promoting it in our town to bring it as something that we show value towards. We can regulate it so they don't sell it at gas stations, so that we don't have growing areas where somebody's going to break into. And believe me, people are going to grow it, whether you let them buy it here or not. They're still going to want to grow it because they're not going to want to pay for it or whatever it might be. I personally am very opposed to it. Just under the aspect that I think the impact on the community would be more negative. I don't think we're going to make a ton of money off it, and I think you're going to be disappointed a year or two to find out what ends up happening as a result of saying, I didn't get a lot of money, but we got a lot of problems. Ordinances, I've complained about houses, I've complained about people putting stuff up without having permits. I pull all the permits that I need. I can't get an ordinance enforced. Who's going to enforce this? Is it the same ordinance guy that does the ordinance enforcement now? I don't know that he's going to be effective. I see a lot of houses across the street from me that are run down, that have got red tags on them. They've been there for a while. What are we doing about that? We've got a lot of things to address in our township, in our village here, that I don't see getting addressed. To say that we're going to put regulations in place, who's going to enforce them? Currently, there's a lot of places that I don't think look that great. We're not doing much about. We live across from Hampton Block. It's an eyesore. The place next to it's a rental. It's an eyesore. couple doors down from me. You can see junk falling out the front door. Nothing's being done. I don't really trust the fact that the village is going to have somebody out there enforcing rules and regulations that we already are not enforcing in place now. Now you're bringing in drugs, and you're bringing in riffraff. I just think it's the wrong idea. That's my 2 cents.
One thing before we go, because I know we were going to shoot for 8:30 close. Has anybody spoken yet, or has anybody not spoken that wants to speak before I do a second round?
I do want to.
I know you do, but I just want to make sure that everybody had a chance to speak that wants to.
Mrs. Cook had her hand up at one point too. Okay.
Thank you, I appreciate that, because I am a taxpayer and I value where I live. First, I want to say there have been lots of research on children smoking marijuana versus drinking alcohol, and which is worse on the developmental brain, so I suggest that maybe you would read that. If you have gone to facilities, then you know that the security is a big issue, not for the retail guy, it's for the people coming in and out. You check out their parking lots. They have security there for those people coming in to make purchases, so they don't get jumped for either their pot or whatever they're buying or their money, because it's not cheap. The other thing is that, yes, it is legal for us to grow it, so if I want to grow it, I can. Doesn't mean that we have to have growing here in Oxford Village. Let the other communities do it, and let everyone visit there and then come here and have a good time. But I'm really against having something in our downtown area at all, because it seems like you have worked for years really hard to get the little festivals that you have going and the parades. But I also want you to think about this. You talk about alcohol and you talk about marijuana. Alcohol is not classified as a drug. Marijuana is a drug, and that's what you are talking about. Nothing about that has changed. It is classified as a drug, and that's what you're talking about bringing into your town. Then why don't we bring in some methadone clinics too, and let's see how happy we'll be about that.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
What do you consider to be the downtown?
The downtown, this, right here, this section with the town clock, our park, all the walking area.
Okay.
Like the Polly Ann Trail.
I just wondered.
Take it out towards Myers. Take it down by CVS. Do not put it in this small area here. You're drawing good people. You want families' right to live here. You want them to raise their children.
I just want to know what you consider the boundaries downtown. That's just a question.
This is not a big city, right? This is a hometown atmosphere is what you're trying to create here. And bringing in retail, and the retail is really hard for me to accept, because I see the head shop, I see the liquor store, and just like my husband says, where the heck is the zoning guy? Because you come on to my house, I have a nice wraparound porch, I'll give you lemonade and everything, you can come sit on my rocker, and you can look at it all. We get quite a show there, but we still keep up our lawn, we shovel that, and we hope that it's going to be brought up. But there is nothing there. There's no zoning guy, anything like that.
Is there,
It's a fabricated drug.
My name is Connie Ogg. I live at 40 Burdick Woods Court. I've only been here 2 years, slightly less. I too love this community, love to walk it. I'm up there 2 or 3 times every day. And thanks to my Oxford leader, I know that the Planning Commission and the council work on our behalf to the best of their abilities. And my hope is that you will take this issue, which has been voted on by the people of Michigan, do your due diligence and do what's best for all of us. And I know that you can come up with rules and regulations that will allow us to have a retail store in one of the empty storefronts on Main Street.
is there anyone else that wants to speak?
Thank you. My name's Kelsey Cook. I'm one of your village planning commissioners. I just wanted to second the request by Chairman Douglas. I know that council voted on the moratorium. At the time, I had recommended the opt-out just to give us time to get this ordinance right. And after hearing, and I think it's kind of echoed through the room from the lawyers and from the planner and our village manager, just how tight of a time frame we're facing with this, with having the regulations out in June and then having to have something in September with all the public notice requirements. I'd like to see more public hearings once we know more information in June and get more opinion from the community as to what could be regulated, time, place, manner, whether we should allow it at all. And so I'm just asking council to reconsider the moratorium, especially if you're considering making the moratorium in the form of an ordinance. You might as well, in my opinion and recommendation, pass an ordinance to opt out. I think a lot of the concern with the opt-out versus moratorium issue was just the community's perception that if we opted out, that means we didn't want it. And obviously, you can tell tonight and by all the discussion in the room that that's up for debate. And I think the council members are all considering that heavily as well, and are really looking to the public to figure out what they want to do. And so I think at this point, the opting out provision is the safest legally, that's a fact, and it will give us the time we need to be able to craft the ordinance. I personally have drafted many ordinances, and I know how long it takes to create an ordinance, even simple ordinances. This one's going to be complex because it's going to be one of the first of its kind in Michigan, and so I think that we really do need the extra time. And the public should be, rest assured that just because, if council does consider opting out, it doesn't mean that they aren't ever going to allow it. They just want to do the best job and have the planning commissioners have the ability to do the best job that we can do in drafting an ordinance. So I wanted to just put that forth again tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey.
Thank you, Kelsey.
It's 8:30.
Okay, we're a little bit past our time, and it was a really good discussion, I think. Council will need to get with the Planning Commission in terms of next step. That's not tonight, but probably want to get at it very soon because we're talking about a timeline with September. So I wish you all, good luck with this. This is the kind of community discussion, though, that you really do need to decide what you want to do.
All right, thank you, Chris, and thank you for moderating this evening. Thank you, Mario, for your input from the planning and zoning side. Thank you, Bob, for your ongoing legal counsel. And I'd like to thank staff for all their work getting this noticed, working on printing and et cetera, all the stuff you do behind the scenes to pull something like this together that we may not see every day. Thank each and every one of you for your comments and your dialogue this evening. Again, this is one step in this process, and council still has the ability to opt out. That ability has not gone away just because we have a moratorium. So there, again, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, our goal is to do our due diligence and figure out what is best for our community. So we're moving on to an adjournment at this point, and similar to how we open the meetings, we will do that in reverse. We'll have the Planning Commission adjourn first, and then we'll have the Village Council adjourn.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. My fellow commissioners, I entertain a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting at 8:35 p.m.
Support.
Jack, were you ready for that or what?
At 8:35, I have a motion and a second for that. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Mr. President, we are adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will entertain a motion to adjourn for the Village Council as well.
So moved at 8, whatever time they thought.
Support? There's a motion with support to adjourn at 8:35. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all.